The stars were cold and silent when Commander Vesa spotted the small object drifting through space. She stood on the bridge of her warship, her tall feline body casting a long shadow across the metal floor. Her fur was dark gray with streaks of silver, and her yellow eyes missed nothing. "What is that?" she asked, pointing one clawed finger at the screen. Her second in command, a younger Caldari named Braun, checked his instruments. "It appears to be an escape pod, Commander. Very small, damaged. It has been drifting for days." Vesa tilted her head. The Caldari were hunters. They had conquered dozens of worlds and enslaved countless species. But this region of space was new to them. They had never seen a pod like this before. "Bring it aboard," she ordered. "I want to see what is inside." The crew worked quickly. Within the hour, the small pod sat in the landing bay, steam rising from its scorched surface. Vesa walked around it slowly, her claws clicking on the floor. The pod was tiny, barely large enough to hold a single adult Caldari. But Caldari did not build such things. This belonged to someone else. "Open it," she commanded. Two soldiers stepped forward and forced the hatch open with a loud hiss. Vesa leaned in to look, and what she saw made her laugh. Inside the pod was a creature. It was small, so very small. It had soft pink skin with no fur, no scales, no armor of any kind. Its limbs were thin and weak. It had no claws, no fangs, no spines. It wore simple cloth coverings and clutched a strange soft object shaped like a small animal. The creature was breathing, but its eyes were closed. It was alive but not awake. "What is this thing?" Braun asked, his nose twitching with confusion. Vesa reached in and lifted the creature out with one massive paw. It weighed almost nothing. She could have crushed it without effort. "I do not know," she said, turning it over to examine it. "But look at it. It is helpless, soft, weak. It could not survive a single day in the wild. Should we kill it?" A soldier asked. Vesa thought for a moment. Then she smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "No, my cubs have been bored lately. They need something to play with. This will be their new toy." She carried the creature through the ship, past rows of soldiers who stared with curious eyes. The Caldari had seen many species before, but never one so fragile. Some laughed. Others shook their heads in pity. Vesa reached her private quarters, where her 3 cubs waited. They were young, still growing, but already larger than the small creature in her arms. Rax was the oldest, with thick muscles and a cruel gleam in his eyes. Mora was the middle child, quick and clever, always watching. And Fel was the youngest, smaller than his siblings, often pushed aside and bullied. "Mother!" Rax jumped up when she entered. "What do you have?" Vesa dropped the creature onto a soft pad in the corner. "A gift for you. I found it drifting in space. It is yours now." The 3 cubs gathered around, sniffing and poking at the small form. The creature stirred slightly, but did not wake. "What is it?" Mora asked. "I do not know," Vesa admitted. "But it does not matter. It is weak. It is soft. It will not last long. Enjoy it while you can." She left her cubs with their new toy and returned to her duties. Hours passed. The creature finally opened its eyes. They were dark brown, like wet earth after rain. For a long moment, she simply stared at the ceiling above her. Then she turned her head and saw 3 large feline faces staring down at her dot. Her name was Yuna. She was 8 years old. And she did not scream. This surprised the cubs. They had expected crying, begging, panic. Instead, the small human girl simply sat up slowly and looked at each of them in turn. Her eyes moved from Rax to Mora to Thel, studying them the way a scientist might study insects. "What is wrong with it?" Rax asked. "Why does it not fear us?" "Maybe it is stupid," Mora suggested. Yuna said nothing. She did not understand their language yet, but she understood enough. She understood that she was in danger. She understood that these creatures were not her friends. And she understood that if she wanted to survive, she would need to be very, very smart. She looked around the room, memorizing every detail. The door with its glowing keypad, the vents in the ceiling, the window showing the stars outside. She noticed how Thel hung back from his siblings, how he flinched when Rax growled at him. Una clutched her stuffed bear tighter. It was the only thing she had left from home, from her parents, from everything she had lost when the attack came and the escape pod launched her into the darkness. She did not know where she was. She did not know if anyone was looking for her. But she knew one thing for certain. She was not going to die here. Not like this. Not as someone's toy. Thel moved closer, curious. He reached out one small paw and touched her hair gently. Una did not pull away. She looked into his eyes and saw something the others did not have. She saw kindness. Hidden and scared, but their Dot and Una, who had learned from her father that survival meant finding allies in unexpected places, made her first decision. She would make Thel her friend, even if it took everything she had. Days passed on the Keldari warship, and Una watched everything Dot. She watched how the doors opened when certain buttons were pressed. She watched how the guards changed shifts every 6 hours. She watched how the vents connected different parts of the ship. And most importantly, she watched the 3 cubs who held her life in their claws. Rax was cruel. He liked to push Una against walls and growl in her face. He would steal her food and laugh when her stomach made hungry sounds. He called her names in the Keldari language, words she was beginning to understand. Mora was clever but cold. She did not hurt Una as often as Rax did, but she also never stopped him. She watched with curious eyes, treating Una like an experiment rather than a living thing. But Thel was different. Thel was the smallest of the 3 cubs. His siblings often bullied him, calling him weak, pushing him away from games. When Rax and Mora slept, Thel would sit near Una's corner and look at her with sad, lonely eyes. One night, when the ship was quiet and dark, Una made her move. She had been saving a small piece of dried meat from her meal. She pulled it from her pocket and held it out toward Thel. The young Keldari stared at her with wide eyes. "For you," Una whispered. She had learned a few words of their language now. Thel hesitated. Then, slowly, he took the food and ate it. When he finished, he looked at Una differently than before. Not as a toy, but as something more. Over the next week, Una and Thel became secret friends. During the day, when Rax and Mora were watching, Thel pretended to ignore her like the others. But at night, he would come to her corner, and they would sit together in the darkness. Una taught him a simple human game. She showed him how to make shapes with his paws: rock, paper, scissors. Thel did not understand at first, but he tried again and again until he got it right. When he finally won a round, his whole face lit up with joy. It was the first time Una had seen him smile. Far away, across the vast emptiness of space, 2 humans were searching. Taiho stood at the controls of a small, battered ship. His hands were steady, but his heart was breaking. His daughter was somewhere out there, alone and afraid. Every moment that passed felt like a knife in his chest. Behind him, his wife Hana worked at the communication station. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboards, her eyes scanning endless streams of data. She had not slept in 3 days. "I found something," Hana said suddenly. Taiho was at her side in an instant. "What? What is it?" Hana pointed at the screen. "A Keldari patrol ship sent a report yesterday. They found an escape pod matching the type Una used. The pod was taken aboard." Taiho's hands clenched into fists. "Where's the ship now?" "I am tracking it. The signal is weak, but I can follow it." Hana looked up at her husband with fierce determination. "We will find her, Taiho. We will bring her home." Taiho nodded. Before this, he had been a soldier, a member of the Special Forces. He had fought in wars and survived impossible situations. But nothing had prepared him for this fear. The fear of losing his child. He would burn the galaxy down if he had to know. One took his daughter and lived, back on the Keldari ship. Commander Vesa was growing curious about her cubs, Toy. She watched from the doorway one evening as Yuna sat quietly in her corner, observing everything with those strange dark eyes. The creature never cried, never begged, never showed fear. It simply watched and waited, like a hunter studying its prey. This bothered Vesa more than she wanted to admit. "The toy is strange," she told Braun later. "It does not behave like prey should. Perhaps it is simply too stupid to understand its situation," Braun suggested. Vesa shook her head. "No, I see intelligence in its eyes. It is thinking, planning. Planning what? It is tiny and weak. What could it possibly do?" Vesa had no answer. But something in her gut warned her that this soft little creature was more dangerous than it appeared. She pushed the feeling aside. It was foolish. The thing could barely walk without stumbling. It ate barely enough to survive. How could it be a threat? But late at night, when Vesa walked past her cub's quarters, she saw something that made her pause. Thel was sitting next to the human, and they were playing some sort of game with their hands. The human made a shape, then Thel made a shape, and then both of them made soft sounds that might have been laughter. Her youngest cub was playing with the toy, not hunting it, not tormenting it, playing with it. Like an equal, Vesa felt a chill run down her spine. She told herself it meant nothing. Thel was always too soft, too weak. He would learn eventually. The toy would break, and Thel would grow strong like his siblings. But as she walked away, she could not shake the feeling that something was changing, something she did not understand. And in the shadows of her corner, Yuna watched the commander leave. She had seen the reflection of the door keypad in Thel's eyes as he entered tonight. 4 numbers. Green, blue, green, red. She memorized them perfectly. Soon, she would need them. Rax was bored. The toy had been fun at first, but now it just sat there, watching, never crying, never running. What was the point of having prey that did not act like prey? He paced back and forth in the quarters, while Mora watched from her bed. Thel was sleeping in the corner, but Rax did not care about his weak little brother. "I have an idea," Rax said suddenly, his yellow eyes gleaming. Mora tilted her head. "What kind of idea?" "A hunt?" Rax bared his teeth in an excited grin. "A real hunt. Like the ones Father used to tell us about before he died. We release the toy in the cargo bay and chase it. First one to catch it wins." Mora considered this. The cargo bay was huge, filled with crates and containers. Perfect hunting ground. Mother would be angry if she found out. Mother is busy with her war council. She will not know. Rax looked at the sleeping human in the corner. "Besides, the toy will probably die. Then we can tell Mother it was an accident." Mora smiled slowly. "I like this plan." They woke Yuna roughly, dragging her from her sleeping pad. She did not struggle or scream. She simply looked at them with those calm, dark eyes that Rax hated so much. "Tonight, we hunt," Rax growled in her face. "You run. We chase. If we catch you before the lights come back on, you die." Yuna understood enough of the words. Her heart beat faster, but her face showed nothing. She had been waiting for something like this. An opportunity. Thel woke up as they dragged Yuna toward the door. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Go back to sleep, Ron," Mora snapped. "This does not concern you." But Thel followed them anyway, staying in the shadows, watching with worried eyes. The cargo bay was dark and cold. Metal containers rose like mountains, creating a maze of paths and hiding spots. Emergency lights cast red shadows across everything. Rack shoved Yuna forward. "You have until we count to 50. Then we come for you." Yuna ran, but she did not run blindly. As she moved through the maze of crates, her mind worked quickly. Her father had taught her things. Survival things. How to move quietly. How to use the environment. How to think like a hunter even when you were the prey. Humans were not the fastest creatures. They were not the strongest. But they were patient. They could think ahead. They could plan. Yuna found a torn piece of fabric caught on a sharp edge. She pulled it free and kept running. She found a stack of small containers that rattled when touched. She memorized their location. She found a narrow space between two large crates, too small for the Keldari cubs to follow. Then she stopped running and started setting traps. Rax finished counting and charged into the maze with a roar. His nose twitched, searching for the human scent. She smelled different from anything he had hunted before. Sweeter, softer. He found her trail and followed it eagerly. Behind him, Mora moved more carefully. She did not trust her brother's wild approach. The toy was smarter than it looked. She had seen it watching, learning. Something about tonight felt wrong. Rax rounded a corner and stopped. There, hanging from a pipe above, was the toy stuffed animal. He stared at it in confusion. Why would the prey leave behind its precious object? He reached up to grab it. The moment he touched it, a wire pulled tight around his ankle. Containers crashed down around him, blocking the path. Before he could react, he stumbled into a narrow gap between crates and found himself stuck. Unable to move forward or back, he roared in fury. But no one came. Mora heard her brother's roar and ran toward the sound. But as she turned a corner, her foot caught on something stretched across the floor. She fell hard, and a stack of heavy containers tilted and crashed down. Pinning her tail to the ground, she screamed in pain and frustration. From the shadows above, Yuna watched Dot. She had climbed the crates using gaps and edges too small for Keldari feet. She sat in the darkness near the ceiling, looking down at her hunters who had become the hunted. Her heart was still beating fast, but there was something else now. Something that felt almost like power. Thel appeared below, looking around with wide, frightened eyes. "Yuna?" He called out softly. She dropped down beside him, silent as a ghost. He jumped in surprise. "Your siblings are caught," she said in broken Keldari. "I did not hurt them. Much." Thel stared at her. In the red emergency light, she looked different. Older, stronger, not like prey at all. "How?" He whispered. Yuna pointed at her head. "Humans think. We watch. We learn. We do not need claws or fangs." She paused, remembering something her father once told her. "We become what we need to become." Rax was still shouting curses from his trap. Mora was crying and trying to free her tail. Neither of them could believe what had happened. They were Keldari. They were predators. How had a tiny, soft, clawless creature defeated them? Yuna walked toward where Rax was stuck. She crouched down so he could see her face through the gap. "You are not hunting me anymore," she said quietly. "Understand?" Rax tried to swipe at her, but his claws could not reach. He had never felt so helpless, so humiliated. When the emergency lights finally returned to normal, Yuna was back in her corner, pretending to sleep. Thel had helped free his siblings, and they had limped back to their beds in silent shame. No one spoke of what happened, but everything had changed. The toy was not a toy anymore. Commander Vesa knew something was wrong the moment she entered her cub's quarters. Rax sat in the corner, not meeting her eyes. His fur was dirty, and there were scratches on his arms. Mora was limping, her tail wrapped in bandages. And Thel stood near the human toy, his body positioned almost like a guard. What happened here? Vesa demanded. Silence. Rax. Tell me. Her eldest son looked up, and Vesa saw something in his eyes she had never seen before. Shame, humiliation, fear. We hunted the toy, he admitted finally. In the cargo bay. Vesa's eyes narrowed. And more silence. Then Mora spoke, her voice barely a whisper. It trapped us. Both of us. Rax was stuck between crates. A container fell on my tail. Vesa felt the world tilt slightly. The toy trapped you? It set traps everywhere, Rax burst out. It used wires and containers, and it knew exactly where we would go. It was like hunting smoke. Vesa turned slowly to look at the small human sitting in the corner. The creature looked back at her with those dark, calm eyes. No fear, no anger. Just patience. The commander had conquered worlds. She had killed thousands. She had never been afraid of anything in her life. But in that moment, looking at that tiny, soft creature that had outsmarted her two oldest cubs, she felt something cold crawl up her spine. Mother. Thel stepped forward, putting himself between Vesa and Yuna. She did not hurt them. She could have. She had Rax helpless. She had Mora pinned. But she chose not to kill them. You defend it? Vesa could not believe what she was hearing. You defend this prey creature over your own siblings? She is not prey, Thel said, and his voice was stronger than Vesa had ever heard it. She is my friend. Before Vesa could respond, the ship shook violently. Alarms began screaming through the corridors. Red lights flashed everywhere. Braun's voice came through the communication system. Commander, an unknown vessel has breached our perimeter. It appeared from nowhere. Our sensors never detected it. Vesa ran to the bridge, her heart pounding. On the main screen, she saw a small, battered ship floating near her warship. It was ugly and old, held together with patches and hope. But it had gotten past all their defenses without being seen. One ship? Vesa laughed despite her worry. Destroy it. We are trying, Commander. But something is wrong with our weapon systems. They are not responding. As if in answer, the lights on the bridge flickered and died. Emergency power kicked in, bathing everything in dim red. What is happening? Vesa shouted that, then the reports started coming in. A boarding party. No, not a party. A single intruder. One creature had cut through the hull and entered the ship, and it was killing her soldiers, not in open combat. The intruder moved through the darkness like a ghost. Guards would disappear from their posts without a sound. Patrols would find their members missing, one by one. Traps appeared in corridors. Doors sealed and refused to open. The ship itself seemed to turn against its own crew. How many intruders? Vesa demanded, watching her tactical display fill with red warning markers. Braun checked the sensors again and again. His face grew pale. Commander, as far as we can tell, there is only one. One? One creature is doing all this. The gravity in the corridor outside the bridge suddenly shifted, sending guards crashing into walls. Then it returned to normal, leaving them dazed and confused. Vesa drew her weapon and moved toward the door. If this intruder wanted a fight, she would give it one. She was a Keldari commander. She feared nothing. The door opened, and she stepped into the corridor. It was empty, dark, silent. She took 3 steps forward. Then a voice spoke from the shadows. In perfect Keldari language with a strange accent. Where is my daughter? Vesa spun, firing her weapon at the sound. The shot hit nothing but empty air. When she turned back, a figure stood before her. It was a human. A male, taller than the little toy, but still smaller than Vesa. He wore dark clothing and carried no visible weapons. but his eyes were cold and hard as steel. "I will not ask again," the human said. "Where is my daughter?" Vesa raised her weapon, but before she could fire, the human moved. She did not even see how he did it. One moment he was standing still. The next, her weapon was on the ground, and she was pinned against the wall with something sharp pressed against her throat. She had fought the strongest warriors in the galaxy. She had never been defeated so quickly. "Your soldiers are alive," the human said calmly. "Most of them. I do not want to kill. I want my daughter. Tell me where she is, and this ends." Vesa looked into his eyes and saw no mercy there. But she also saw no madness. This was not a berserker or a wild beast. This was something far more dangerous done. This was apparent. And she understood, in that moment, exactly what humans were. "She's in my quarters," Vesa whispered. "With my cubs. She is unharmed." The human released her and stepped back. "Take me to her, now." Vesa led the way, her legs shaking. Behind her, the human walked in silence, and every shadow seemed to follow him. The door to Vesa's quarters opened, and Taiho saw his daughter for the first time in weeks. She was thin, tired. Her clothes were torn and dirty. But she was alive. She was standing. And when she saw him, her face finally broke into the expression of a child rather than a survivor. "Appa!" Yuna ran to him, and he caught her in his arms, holding her so tight he was afraid he might break her. But he could not let go. "Not yet. Not ever again. I am here," he whispered into her hair. "I am here now. You are safe." Behind Yuna, 3 Keldari cubs stood frozen with fear. 2 of them pressed against the wall, trembling. But the smallest one stepped forward with something that looked almost like concern. "Do not hurt her," Thel said, his voice shaking. "Please, she is my friend." Taiho looked at the young Keldari with surprise. He had expected only enemies on this ship. But his daughter was looking at Thel with genuine affection. "He protected me, Appa," Yuna said. "When the others were mean, Thel was kind. He is not like them." Taiho studied the small cub. He saw the fear, yes. But he also saw something else. Courage. It took bravery to speak up for a human in front of a human warrior who had just disabled an entire warship. "Is this true?" Taiho asked Vesa. The commander stood stiff and proud, but her voice was hollow. "Thel has always been different from his siblings. Weak, soft. I thought it was a flaw." "It was not a flaw," Yuna said firmly. "It was the best part of him." Taiho made a decision. He had come here prepared to fight, prepared to kill, prepared to burn this ship to ash if necessary. But his daughter was safe, and she was asking him for something. He lowered the small blade he had been holding against Vesa's back. "I am taking my daughter," he said. "And the cub, if he wants to come." Thel's eyes went wide. "What? You showed kindness to my daughter when no one else did. That means something to humans." Taiho looked at Vesa. "He does not belong here. Not in a world where kindness is seen as weakness." Vesa wanted to argue. Thel was her son, her blood. But she looked at him, really looked at him for the first time, and saw the truth. He had never fit in. He had always been alone. And now he had a chance at something different. "Go," she said, the word tearing from her throat. "Mother?" Thel stared at her in disbelief. "I said go." Vesa's voice cracked. "Though before I change my mind. Go and live whatever strange life the humans will give you. But remember that you are still Keldari." Thel walked to stand beside Yuna. She took his paw in her small hand. Rax finally found his voice. "You cannot be serious. You are letting them take our brother? You are letting them win?" Vesa turned on him with fury in her eyes. "They already won, you fool. One human disabled our ship. One child outsmarted both of you. They were never our prey. She looked at Taiho with something that might have been respect. We were always theirs. Taiho led Yuna and Thel through the corridors of the ship. The soldiers they passed did not try to stop them. Some were still recovering from his earlier attacks. Others simply watched in silence, too shocked to move. When they reached the docking bay, Hana was waiting in their ship. She saw Yuna and burst into tears, pulling her daughter into a desperate embrace. "My baby! My baby girl!" They held each other for a long time. Then Hana noticed Thel standing awkwardly to the side, looking terrified and lost. "Who is this?" "A friend," Yuna said simply. "He comes with us." Hana looked at Taiho with questions in her eyes. He nodded once. That was enough. As their ship pulled away from the Keldari warship, Thel pressed his face against the window, watching his old home grow smaller. He did not know what waited for him in the human world. He did not know if he would ever see his mother again. But when Yuna sat beside him and leaned against his shoulder, he felt something he had never felt before. He felt like he belonged. "Commander." Vesa stood on her bridge and watched the human ship disappear into the stars. Braun stood beside her, his face troubled. "The High Command will want an explanation," he said. "One human against an entire warship. They will not believe it." "Let them come see for themselves," Vesa replied. "Let them hunt the humans and learn what I have learned." "And what is that, Commander?" Vesa was quiet for a long moment. She thought of the tiny girl who had trapped her strongest cubs. She thought of the man who had moved through her ship like death itself. She thought of how they had chosen mercy when they could have chosen slaughter. "Humans are not predators," she said finally. "They are not prey. They are something we have no word for." She turned away from the stars. "They are the creatures who decide what they want to be. And heaven help anyone who stands between them and their pack." Somewhere in the endless dark between stars, a small ship carried a family home. A father who would destroy worlds for his child. A mother who never stopped searching. A daughter who refused to be prey. And a young Keldari who had learned that kindness was not weakness after all. The galaxy was vast and full of terrors. But now it knew. Now it knew what humans were, and nothing would ever be quite the same again.